It's a beautiful winter's day in Cape Town here at Harbour House in Kalk Bay in Cape Town. It's where there are fishing boats and where local people take their trawlers out and go and fish, and they catch things like yellowtail. And in December and January, if you're on holiday in places like Fishhook, you will see the fishermen use their drag nets up onto the beach and pull up tons of yellowtail over the season. But there is also commercial fishing in South Africa, and for the last 50 years, Sea Harvest has been pulling hake out of South Africa's waters. Felix Ratheb is the chief executive of Sea Harvest, and what is the 50th anniversary this year, Felix?
It is 50 this year, that's correct, Bruce.
But if we go back, I mean, your big markets nowadays, you've got a South African market, but there's a big Spanish market because it used to be Spanish-owned.
That's correct. We were founded in 1964. It was a joint venture between the then ICS group that was spun out of Barlow's and Pescanova. Pescanova were 50% shareholders in the business. Predominantly our export market was Spain, but over the years we've developed a local market, and a lot of other southern European countries like Italy, France, Portugal, as well as now Australia and the US. So we're everywhere.
Absolutely loving a weaker rand environment. It's terribly useful for sales. I suppose from a capital equipment point of view it's a bit damaging too.
We're one of the industries that is a good rand hedge, that's correct. I would say about 50 to 60% of our product is sold internationally, really euro-based. So a weak rand is good for our business.
A weak rand is good for the business, but when you've got capital equipment, I think you've got 10 or 11 huge fishing trawlers which probably sell at 100 million rand a pop or thereabouts. You've got to buy that kind of capital equipment. You're buying it in Forex too, aren't you?
Correct. So this year we bought a vessel, the Harvest Atlantic Peace. She was fishing in Greenland, halibut, owned by Germans. So we bought it from a German company, and yeah, she cost 130 million rand. If we bought it 5 years ago, she would have cost us 70 million rand. So it hits you on the capital side.
And the fleet size, in terms of you employ something like 500 or 600 people at sea at any point, 2,500 people with packaging and processing and all of that sort of stuff. Not only is it capital intensive, but it is also massively labor intensive for what a business with a turnover of 1.4 billion rand?
Very much so. So we employ about 1,500 people in our operations, which is our two factories. The one factory we do fresh fish processing, and the other one we add value, your fish fingers and your coated products, etc. We have about 600 people at sea and about 200-300 people in admin. We've also got a processing facility in Mossel Bay, so we also operate out of there. It's a joint venture between our joint venture partners there.
Because you were part of Tiger Brands up until 2008, 2009, if memory serves, and then you took a perfectly well-timed decision in the middle of the financial crisis to go private. And Brimstone came in and bought you. Kagiso taken a big stake. I think management have got a stake as well. Take that to 100%. You borrowed money at a most wonderful point of the cycle.
Yeah, it was a very difficult period in our lives, I would say. We got a great price in terms of timing. In 2008, we bought the business out of Tiger.
Because Tiger wanted to buy AVI, and they've got I&J, so they kind of thought, let's get rid of Sea Harvest to avoid the Competition Commission.
That was, I think, part of the reason, but you'll have to ask them that. I think it was perfect timing for us in terms of buying the business. I don't think Sea Harvest would fit the Tiger model in terms of its cyclical nature of earnings. Whereas I think in other investors' hands, it's a good cash generative business. So we bought the business at a very good price, but you're quite right, it was in the middle of the financial crisis. So number one, the debt was expensive. And secondly, obviously we had chaos around the world, and us being exposed, we export to 22 countries around the world. So our customers were in trouble. The rand got stronger. If you remember, we had all the capital inflows. So when you take 20-30% off your top line, you really have to reinvent your business, and you've got debt. So it was a tough 5 years. But I'm happy to say we survived it.
But one looks in this bay, for example, this is False Bay just behind me, and it's teeming with life, or it feels like it's teeming with life. The whales are here now. Of a day, you'll see dolphins bobbing about as well. You'll see the fishermen go out from Kalk Bay Harbour, and they'll take their nets out and they'll catch huge quantities of yellowtail in particular. You're fishing 80, 90, 100 nautical miles offshore. Whereabouts is this?
It's about, it starts about 100 nautical miles, I would say, north of Saldanha Bay, and we fish all the way across to Port Elizabeth. So it's across the whole coastline. We're very deep sea, so it's very big trawlers, on average anything between 45 to 60 meters, with crew between 35 to 60, some 80 crew on board. Very deep, 800 meters in depth with trawl gear. And it's a very capital and labor intensive industry.
How green is it?
It's very green. The resource right now is very well managed. In South Africa, we've got very good science and traditionally have had very good science. In fact, we're probably the market leaders in terms of that. In 2004, the fishery was certified by an organization called the Marine Stewardship Council. It was born out of Unilever and really looking at sustainability, getting a common policy in terms of sustainability of fisheries. We were the first hake fishery in the world to be certified. And that gave us access to many, many markets that were closed before. Like, for example, in certain markets like Germany or the US, you cannot sell product if you're not MSC certified, and that is the gold standard of certification. So the resource is in a healthy state here.
But it's a wild resource. I mean, there's no farming, resource. For example, of hake. The hake, and as I understand it, I've always thought we could just farm hake like they farm salmon in the Northern Hemisphere, and that would sort out the shortages. But they're cannibals.
That's right, yeah, it's cannibalistic. So no, farming hake, nobody's done it anywhere in the world that I know of. They've tried to farm cod in Norway, and I think they've pretty much given up that too. So it's not a resource that you can farm. It's a wild caught resource. It's a bottom feeder, so they're right at the bottom of the ocean. And what we have found with hake, it's a pretty resilient fish. So even though we have dips in terms of the biomass, it recovers quite nicely. As soon as you have cuts in terms of what you can actually harvest, we're seeing good recovery.
And how serious is that at the moment? I mean, you're harvesting something like 40,000 tons, which I can't even conceptualize how much fish that is.
It's a lot of fish.
That's a lot of fish.
Yeah.
I mean, you're doing it, I&J is doing it. We see foreign trawlers in our waters too coming in and fishing.
Foreign trawlers aren't in our waters. It's very much regulated here. So it's a quota system.
Are we any good at policing it?
We're very good at policing it. I think you find that the problems are more with your tuna type of migratory fish, which are high value. But hake, there's specified vessels with a permit and a specified quota with operators that look at it from a long-term perspective, because, I mean, your quota is at risk if you do anything wrong. So our rights are long-term. We've got rights until 2021 in the deep sea. So it's well policed, well governed. We don't have those type of issues in our fishery.
And how those quotas, how are they sort of evolving year on year?
We were given long-term rights, so they were 15-year rights. I guess it's probably one of the biggest challenges in our business, because when you've only got something for a finite period, it's kind of tricky to make huge capital investments, which we have. Our competitor this year invested over 400 million in vessels, and this year we've invested 150 with a plan to invest another 300 million over the next, I would say, 6-7 years. But as we do that, we come to the end of our quota period.
That doesn't sound very bright. In an environment where regulations can be flexible.
We create a lot of jobs. I mean, the reality is that if you look at a town of Saldanha Bay, we are Saldanha Bay. I mean, we employ about 30% of the town. We had a socioeconomic impact study done by the University of Cape Town, and they found that between 30 to 50% of wages in the town depend on us. Most of the people, either the father or the mother or a child is working at Sea Harvest. So we create a lot of jobs on the West Coast. In fact, they went as far as saying that Sea Harvest is a national asset. If you look at the amount of job it creates, the maximum beneficiation that we make in South Africa, and the fact that we sell product to 22 countries around the world. So to take that away, I don't think is really a solution. I would think also the fact that we have transformed in this industry. It's a very well transformed industry. We went, to give you an example, in 2007, our black shareholding in our business was 26%. We're sitting at over 80% today. So it's a very well transformed industry.
When we look at the issues of fishing generally, the line fishermen, for example, have had their quotas cut. Is there a big gap between the sustainability of what's happening in this bay, for example, between what guys can catch on a line and what's happening far out at sea?
It's a very good question. I think what we found globally is that as soon as you try and fragment the industry and try and divide it up and give it to everyone, it's very difficult to control it. And that's, you can see all over the coast of Africa. You can see it in Namibia, in Argentina, where they've got big fisheries. All of them are in trouble because there's sort of a social side to things. Whereas if you see what's happening in the US or in more of the developed world, it's more a commercial reality. What this fishery needs, what fishing generally needs, is scale. It needs scale. If you're going to go and export to a customer like Walmart or Lidl or Aldi, the big retailers in the world, you need economies of scale to be competitive. And then you have to be bigger. And you have to be able to acquire to get bigger, which is one of the challenges we face in South Africa. It's not so easy to get that scale.
Yeah, but that's it. There are two big players in South Africa. There's you guys and there's I&J. You know, how do you grow this business from a 1.4 billion rand business this year to a 2 billion rand business in 5 years' time? Because you're not going to get the volumes necessarily. It's got to be on exports. It's got to be on currency.
Well, there are a few things. The one thing is that to ensure that the fish is sustainable, because then your quota goes up. So the more fish, the better the biomass, the more volume you'll get. And we have a percentage of that, so theoretically speaking, we'll have more fish. The second one is acquisitions. Ourselves and I&J have got about, between us, around 57% of the quota. So there's still a lot of quota out there in terms of making sure.
How do you manage the politics of communities and the politics, that level of involvement where this little village of Kalk Bay is massively dependent on survivalist fishing?
Those type of fisheries are more inshore fisheries, so it's closer with smaller vessels that someone can go out. We're talking about big trawlers going very deep, trying to catch fish at depths of 800 meters. So it's a very specialized fishery. So we would look at quota holders that would have hake. It's not that easy because most of it is tied up, as you correctly say. But at the same time, we're very single species dependent. We only catch hake. So there's a lot of other fish out there. You know, there's pelagic fish, your anchovy, your pilchards. So we could look at acquisitions in that particular area. Or we could go as far as saying maybe not grow in what we're good at and look at food in general. So there are options in terms of growing the top line.
Does this business exist 50 years from now? It's been around 50. Does it have a 100th anniversary as a hake fishing business primarily?
I believe so. I think it'll be an easier 50 years. If you look at the first 50 years, you started off with a product that nobody knew globally. You then created a market internationally, and then we were hit by sanctions, and you couldn't export your fish, and then you had to create a market locally. In 1994, when the markets opened up again, like our sports teams, we had to go and reinvent ourselves again. We weren't great players of fish, so we did it, and we're on the map again. I think the next 50 years will be slightly easier. I think what's important is stability in terms of the country. We sell brand South Africa out there. We don't necessarily sell fish only.
Yeah.
The Madiba story opens up markets for us. Our sustainability credentials open up market. The fact that we've got lovely wine that we can pair with fish open up markets. And the reality is that we're in the food business. And the food business globally, it's a defensive industry. If you see what's happening in all our markets, populations are growing. They need to eat more. As they're eating more, they become a little bit more obese. What happens after that? You need to eat healthy. What is the perfect product for that? It's fish. So if we look at it from that perspective, and it's full of brain food, it's full of omega-3, so we have the perfect protein for our consumer.
Well, there we go. He's a confident guy, but the fishing industry needs scale. There was a fishing joke thrown in there as well. Felix Ratheb is the Chief Executive of Sea Harvest. Thanks for joining us in Kalk Bay for Tonight with Bruce Whitfield. Thank you for watching. We'll be back in studio next time when it's a little bit darker. I'm going off to the beach now to say and see what the fishermen are catching. Till next time, good night.